Hi, I'm Peter Chan, National Weather Service Program Lead of the Alaska Weather Show, and I have a very important change notice to share with you. The last TV broadcast of the Alaska Weather Show in the traditional sense over the airwaves will be on Saturday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st and thereafter, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. So that means you'll be able to find us. We'll be moving from @AKwx TV to @NWS Alaska, and you can go ahead and subscribe to that channel now. There will be a public comment period from May 15th through July 30th, so please send your comments or concerns to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov. And if you have any other questions, you may reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy. Up first, hazardous weather graphic. We've got a couple of watch areas here. Flood watch on the river there. Let's see, the Yukon, flood watch for the Yukon River at Tanana. That's out for tonight into tomorrow for possible ice jam flood warning at Tanana there on the river. And then also here, flood watch out for the Kuskokwim Delta there for the Kuskokwim River. Let's see, from areas downstream of Kalskag to Kwethlek area, and that's out for tonight and tomorrow as well. And out here in the Bering Sea, a winter storm warning continues until 10 p.m. this evening for St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast. Continued north winds gusting anywhere from 40 to 50 miles an hour, and snow and blowing snow reducing visibilities to possibly a quarter mile or less in that area through 10 p.m. this evening. At which time it'll end, and then during the same time frame, winter weather advisory continues there for the Shishmaref area, north side of the Seward Peninsula, as well as the northwest coast here for conditions for blowing snow and additional snowfall and blowing snow. Gusty winds may be up to 40 miles an hour, but less severe than down here in the warning area. And over the greater Fairbanks area, mid-Tanana Valley, a wind advisory out for tonight for winds gusting to 40 miles an hour. Wind advisory remains out here for the Alaska Range for winds, let's see, gusting 25 or sustained winds of 25 to 40 miles an hour. Possible gusts to 65 miles an hour through the higher passes of the Alaska Range, and that's out through tonight. And satellite imagery showing front moving eastward here from the big low that's stalled out over the Yukon Delta now, weakening as it pushes eastward, but held together a little bit better than I thought it was yesterday. So that brought some gusty winds up to 43 miles an hour at Anchorage International Airport earlier today. Delta Junction had peak wind gusts about 45 miles per hour. And windy conditions with some light rain coming through with that. Of course, snow at the higher elevations, pushing into the Copper River Basin. A little bit of moisture there, winds kicking up 20 to 30 miles an hour in the normally windier areas there of the Copper River Basin. And not much moisture north of the mountains there, just mid and high level clouds moving into the mid and upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country. Otherwise, sunshine here over most of the southeast coast. A few clouds up there to the north, dry conditions, mild temperatures again there, and pretty light winds out here over the Bering Sea. Northerly flow coming down on the backside of that system, pulling cold air all the way down into the eastern Aleutians. Pribilof Island snow much of the day, tapering off this afternoon. Light snow reported all day long. St. Paul Island there, again, that appears to have ended here over the last couple hours, but winds gusting up to 30, 35 miles an hour, temperature about 30 degrees Fahrenheit this afternoon there, and snow showers down to the eastern Aleutians, showery conditions here at Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay, and then mostly just clouds and chilly temperatures out for the remainder of the Aleutians there, and high pressure beginning to develop out here is going to keep anything out to the west there. It tries to push through and direct it north into Russia. Otherwise, here's the position of this weakening front coming across south central Alaska today and kind of edging northward there, weakening as well. The main low center now right along the Yukon Delta coast, and pretty good gradient kept those winds going. Gusts again up to 50 miles an hour St. Lawrence Island with some blowing snow at times and snow, and less of that up to the northwest coast. Areas of light snow along the north slope today in the Arctic coast, partly to mostly sunny, and again surges of clouds coming north of the Alaska Range there into the eastern interior areas. Sunshine across the southeast coast. Also cleared out over Kodiak Island earlier today. May get a few clouds here this afternoon coming in with this kind of southwest flow back to the west. Weak trough through here. We'll see tonight rotates and brings a few scattered showers to the Alaska Peninsula. Light winds, a gradient really slackening now, so those winds dying off this evening overnight for St. Lawrence Island down to the Pribilofs, even up through the Bering Strait, and scattered showers of rain or snow western, maybe into the central interior areas, and then with a weak low up here over the northeast interior there on the southeastern Brooks Range, that could kick off a few isolated showers as well up there. Otherwise dry and probably mostly clear for the eastern interior all the way down into Prince William Sound. Dry conditions now south central Alaska, high pressure ridging up now with that front completely dissipated out, and fair over the Panhandle. Light winds, mostly clear skies. Trough down here to the south may nudge a little moisture up for a risk of a shower. That's mostly over Dixon Entrance. Go for tomorrow. That's not even a factor now. Sunny skies for the Panhandle into the southeast interior, partly and mostly sunny south central Alaska. Any shower activity will be restricted along the western Alaska Range into the Kuskokwim Valley. Low center stalled out, slowly weakening over the Yukon Delta. Keeps it chilly, cloudy, and unsettled there with shower activity, and still a chance of snow showers for the Pribilofs. Rain or snow shower chances of light rain or snow showers for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. Trough extending northeastward from that center. We'll also kick off a few scattered rain and snow showers over the Kobuk, Koyukuk Valley up across the Brooks Range, maybe some light snow flurries with fog for the eastern Arctic coast. Back to the west, high pressure holds over the western Aleutians, dominates all of the western and central Bering Sea there, keeping any storminess well back to the west. And then we'll see on Thursday, this low vanishes completely. Northeast flow now carries all that moisture down south of the Aleutians, maybe some early snow showers for the Fox Islands early on. Whatever occurs will be light, and then probably clearing out after that with partly mostly sunny skies for the Pribilofs, partly mostly sunny for St. Lawrence Island with light winds all through this area in the Bering Sea, and not too bad over the interior. Sunny skies, light north to northeast wind flow here, or east northeast wind flow. Very light south of the Alaska Range, and then light winds under the ridge axis for the north slope and the Arctic coast. Weak disturbance kind of skirting over the top of that ridge, dropping southeastward, may bring a few skiffs of snow from possibly a dead horse over toward Barter Island, Kaktovik, and that's about it moisture-wise for interior Alaska. Low pressure down here well southeast of Kodiak Island. That spins a trough, may bring some rain up to Kodiak Island during the day on Thursday. Iffy right now, and then also some moisture may work into the southern Panhandle in the form of some afternoon thunderstorms with temperatures rising into the 70s. There could trigger some thunderstorm activity. Misty fjords over toward let's see, Metlakatla, Ketchikan, those areas. Otherwise, another sunny, dry day for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast. Variable clouds here across southern Alaska. To call it probably partly to mostly sunny skies would be better. And then looking at temperatures, moving on to temperatures. Lows tonight, 40s for the Panhandle, 30s southern Alaska. And so it looks like above freezing everywhere, even the Copper River Basin. And highs tomorrow, mid-60s Copper River Basin, mid-50s down toward Port Valdez, and 50 to 55 south central Alaska, and in the 40s west of the Alaska Range to Kodiak Island, and 60s and 70s for the southeast coast. Lows 40s for the Panhandle, in the 30s here for southern Alaska, and followed by highs mid-60s to upper 70s here for the southeast coast. Very nice conditions continuing, and lower 60s for the North Gulf Coast, near 70 in the Copper River Basin. Mid-60s Susitna Valley, otherwise in the 50s for south central Alaska, Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and up to the north, lows tonight 30s and 40s south of the Brooks Range, teens and 20s north of the Brooks Range of the Arctic coast, and lower 30s to mid-20s here for the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula area. Followed by highs tomorrow, 65 to 75 eastern interior, and then chilling off into the 20s and 30s out towards St. Lawrence Island and the Seward Peninsula as well as the Arctic coast. Lows the following morning, mild. Lower 40s, lower to mid 40s over the eastern interior here, but still down well into the 20s for the Arctic coast north slope, all the way down Seward Peninsula except for Nome, 31. And then the highs, mid 60s around the Fairbanks area, lower to mid 70s off to the east, 20s and 30s for the lows for the Aleutians, followed by highs 30s and 40s, followed by lows in the mid 20s to mid 30s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
For Wednesday morning, IFR here, Seward Peninsula, right on down along the southwest coast, and then inland here across northern Togiak Bay, and possibly into the extreme southern Kuskokwim Valley, with marginal VFR into Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, and then on up along the Alaska Range. Solid VFR north of the mountains there until you get up into the northern Koyukuk, Kobuk Valley areas, and then marginal VFR with a couple of bands of IFR there on out to the Arctic coast. Copper River Basin, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, VFR right on down across the southeast coast. For the afternoon, Aleutians, mostly marginal VFR, a little bit better farther west there, and marginal VFR just west or to over the Pribilofs there, the VFR just to the west. And marginal VFR western interior, and not too bad, only IFR along the Arctic coast. Really nice central eastern interior, possible marginal VFR western Alaska Range, but VFR down across the Panhandle. And for Thursday morning, VFR southeast coast, Gulf of Alaska, and much of interior Alaska. Out here to the west, still enough moisture there for IFR along the southwest coast, especially Nunivak Island and the areas off the coast there into Norton Sound, western Seward Peninsula up along the western Arctic coast. Marginal VFR, southern Bering Sea, and our central southern Bering Sea, the Aleutians up to southern Kodiak Island. And then for the afternoon, really good VFR now, just about all of interior Alaska. Out along the coast here, actually the northern Yukon Delta coast, marginal VFR that covers all of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians will extend up through the Bering Strait and northwest coast, Kivalina, Point Hope, up to about Wainwright there. Barrow eastward, though, VFR, and southeast coast, VFR, Kodiak Island, everywhere else, even the Gulf of Alaska, looking at VFR flying there. And for the passes, Anatuvik and Adigan tomorrow, look for occasional marginal VFR, trending better into the afternoon hours. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR. For rainy, same forecast, marginal VFR there as well. But VFR for windy and the eastern Alaska Range looking pretty good. Isabel and Mentasta, both VFR. And for Tanita, VFR. Portage, VFR, Chilkoot and White, a couple more days of VFR, definitely VFR tomorrow. And for the freezing levels here for tomorrow morning, 12,000 feet with the upper level ridge there over the Panhandle, and quite a gradient here over the eastern interior, central eastern interior, 2 to 10,000 feet there. Cooler out here with the trough aloft there out over the Bering Sea. And for icing, Leftover moisture here still have some potential for isolated moderate rime icing along the Kuskokwim Valley, Yukon River area, up into the Kobuk Valley, maybe Selawik, and then branching northeastward there across the Brooks Range to the eastern Arctic coast. Icing free everywhere else. And for the jet stream here, south-southwest flow tomorrow morning at about, or tomorrow afternoon at about 100 to 115 knots here, right across south central Alaska, and then taking off to the northeast there, and then northerlies back to the west here, turning north-northwest, maybe 110 knots for Adak and Atka. Excuse me. And then for 9,000 feet, got a trough right through here, and of course the northerly flow pulling that colder air down into the Bering Sea there, south to north flow here, keeping it warmer, with coming up over the top of this ridge over the high pressure in northwest Canada, but about 40 knots here across south central Alaska up into the Tanana Valley areas. And for 3,000 feet, this elevation, pretty light winds everywhere, light variable conditions over the interior, the Panhandle, the North Gulf Coast to Kodiak Island, and maybe some northerlies here up to 20 to 25 knots, St. Lawrence Island, down to just west of the Pribilofs, and then tapering off as they reach the east central Aleutian areas. And then another big area, high pressure, keeping winds light and variable over the western Bering Sea and the western and central Aleutians. And from there, taking a look at turbulence. Not too bad with those light winds. Maybe isolated moderate turbulence here for the eastern Aleutians back to near Atka, surface 6,000 feet. Otherwise, nothing significant elsewhere. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
So the sun, looking here from the ground, seems very constant and quiet. But actually, when we look at it from space, we can see it's quite turbulent and active. Space weather is activity on the sun and in a near-Earth space that can affect our technological infrastructure and society. The sun is constantly spewing out a stream of particles called the solar wind that goes out into the solar system. And it affects us here near Earth, where we're protected by a magnetic field. The interaction between the solar wind and the magnetic field can cause space weather. The Carrington event is the largest storm we've seen in recorded history when we're looking at space weather. But every solar cycle, which repeats about every 11 years, one estimate estimates that there's a 10% chance of getting a large storm like the Carrington event that could impact us here on Earth. But we see solar storms almost all the time. And these storms have an effect on our technological infrastructure. Solar storms can cause activity in Earth's atmosphere and magnetosphere that can damage electrical power grids that power our communities, interrupt radio and satellite communications, and can cause our GPS navigation to fail. NOAA is working with its international partners to ensure that we have different vantage points where we can observe space weather. Our space weather observing infrastructure from space includes the NOAA Discover satellite and the NASA ACE satellite that are stationed upstream of Earth to give us a first buoy measurement of the solar wind. It also includes the ESA-NASA SOHO satellite and the NASA Stereo satellite that image the sun and also make coronagraph measurements of the outer atmosphere of the sun, the corona, that can tell us when large explosions happen off the sun. We also observe the sun and the Earth's magnetic field from the geostationary location with NOAA's GOES. So the way we use the space weather information from satellites and from the ground is to be able to make forecasts and predictions, just like we do with hurricanes and terrestrial weather. We observe the sun and look for activity and see how it develops. and see if it's going to culminate into a large explosion that can affect us here on Earth. NOAA is working with its international partners to expand our observing capability. We're committed to observing along the Sun-Earth line. So we're going to do the imaging of the sun and the upstream buoy measurements of the solar wind along the Sun-Earth axis. The more we understand about the sun, the more we can prepare for it and become, just like we are a weather-ready nation, become a space weather-ready nation. And as we look forward to humans exploring out into the solar system and advancing our space commerce activities, space weather becomes more and more important.
Here at the Space Weather Prediction Center, we monitor space activity as it's occurring back at the sun, and then we issue out a forecast as well as alerts, watches, and warnings as activity is occurring. A typical space weather event would start with a solar flare back at the sun. That solar flare is short-lived and produces fairly short-lived impacts as well, basically impacting communications on the daylit side of the Earth. However, some solar flares are also associated with a coronal mass ejection or an eruption of plasma that's blasted off the sun and out into space. As forecasters, it's our job to determine if that cloud of plasma is moving towards Earth, and if it comes towards Earth, what the potential impacts may be. Those impacts can range from a fairly low-level storm that may produce the aurora a little bit farther south than usual, or can range up into fairly significant magnetic disturbances that don't happen very often, but when they do, they can impact technologies and infrastructure here on Earth. We provide information to lots of different user groups, from airlines to the electric power grid to emergency managers, aviation, satellite community, lots of different customers.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And for the south coast of the Panhandle tomorrow, northwesterlies at about 20 knots with seas around 6 feet. Central coast northwest at 15, and for the north coast west 15 knots, seas 5 feet. Lynn Canal area, Glacier Bay, northern inner channels, northwesterlies on the light side at about 10 knots with slight seas. Same thing for Stevens Passage, and about the same for Clarence Strait. North winds 10 knots, seas 3 feet. And for Thursday, for Clarence Strait, southeast at 15. And for Stevens Passage and Lynn Canal, northerlies at about 10 knots with 2-foot seas. South coast looking south to southeast at 15. And for the central coast, north at 15, and the north coast, north to northeast, 10 to 15 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet. And for the Prince William Sound zone, west winds 10 knots for the day Wednesday. Cook Inlet, south to southwest breeze, 10 to 15 knots. South at 15 for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands and the North Gulf Coast. Winds will be mostly west to southwest at about 15 with 3 to 4 foot seas. And for Thursday, eastern North Gulf Coast, light variable wind conditions there with seas running 3 to 4 feet. Western North Gulf Coast, go north at 15. Barren Islands, north at 20, Kamishak Bay, north winds at 20 knots. Southern Cook Inlet, northeast at 20 knots. Northern Cook Inlet, north at 15 knots with 4-foot seas. Prince William Sound, north winds 15 knots for Thursday with seas 2 feet. Kodiak Island on Wednesday, southerlies at 15, not too bad there. West-northwest at 15 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay, southwest at 10, seas 3 feet. And for the Alaska Peninsula on Thursday, north to northwest, give or take there in the direction a little bit at 15 to 20 knots. Bristol Bay, north at 20 knots. Kodiak Island, including Shelikof Strait, winds north at 20 knots with 4 to 5 foot seas. And for the eastern Aleutians, and actually AKwx eastward down Alaska, northwest 20 knots tomorrow, seas running 5 to 9 feet. And for the western areas, variable winds 10 to 15 knots. And then for the next day, Thursday, variable out here from Kiska to Shimi at about 15 knots, northwest 20 to 25 knots here for Amchitka, Adak, and Atka. Eastern Aleutians, north to northwest at 20 to 25 knots. And for the areas along the southwest coast here, south of Nunivak Island, southwest at 20, northwesterlies 25 knots there for St. Paul, St. George, St. Matthew Island, and south at 15 for the Yukon Delta coast, southeast at 15 for St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, east winds 15 knots, 3 foot seas, northeast at 15 for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island, as well as Yukon Delta coast. On Thursday, St. Matthew, St. Paul, St. George Island, north at 15, while the Kuskokwim Delta coast will be looking at northerly winds at about 20 knots. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for Wednesday, east winds at 15 knots, southeast at 10 on the central coast, back to east at 15 on the western coast, and east to northeast winds 15 to 20 knots for the Chukchi Sea. And for Thursday, south winds 10 knots from Wales to Cape Thompson. Otherwise, the western Arctic coast, southwest 15 to maybe 20 knots. West 15 knots for the central coast. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west winds 15 to 20 knots. And for tonight, this low over the Yukon Delta, slowly weakening, not moving a whole lot there. A couple of troughs rotating around it, keeps some shower activity in over the southwest interior. Heaviest back along the coast, Kuskokwim Delta. Scattered showers down across the Alaska Peninsula, and improving conditions up here over the northwest part of the state. Still kind of snowy here with a winter storm warning out until 10 p.m. this evening, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast. Drier as you head east, becoming mostly clear over the eastern interior and the Panhandle. For tomorrow, a little more sunshine here over south central Alaska. Sunny for the Copper River Basin, about the same over the eastern interior. This trough keeps it a little cloudier for the eastern North Slope and Arctic coast, a chance of snow. Sunny and warm for the southeast coast. Low pressure keeps it unsettled over the Yukon Delta. That's finally gone on Thursday. High pressure dominating the area with mostly sunny skies, mild temperatures, and light winds.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.